We very quickly got into the Asian market, like Japan and Korea.
Without having studied fashion or having any prior work experience at a fashion house, how did Gracy Accad, in just 4 years, become a fashion designer who Martha Stewart said could be the next Monique Lhuillier?
I did get dressed up for school every day. When people were wearing Central Park skirts, I was wearing like denim skirts belted with a top. Like, I always made an effort because I cared about how I presented myself.
Why?
Just the way I grew up. Like, we weren't allowed to leave the house with sweatpants. It wasn't a thing. Like, you always had to be put together. So it was ingrained in me from a very young age. Like, how you present yourself is very important.
Growing up, were you always thinking about like the latest fashion trends? Were you very in tune with?
When I was younger, like in my teens, I would say I was more trendy. But growing up, my parents would always they traveled a lot for business, so they would take us along, and we would shop when we were traveling, and it was more about the quality of the items instead of the quantity, and they were into the timeless pieces because we were 4 girls. My parents, they always made an experience of us shopping, and it was like a bonding time, and we always had fun with it.
So you went to college?
Yeah, I went to Baruch. I always thought I wanted to go into administration or something like that because my mom worked with my dad and she was the head of production and design. So I always thought I was going to take over her position. In the end, it wasn't my path. I didn't understand that market so much. I pretty much really got started when we had a lot of smachot in 1 year. We're 4 girls, 3 of us were getting married in that year. So my mom took us to a dressmaker and I was so excited. The process was so fun for me. I remember seeing this navy fabric with a literally hand-painted white rose, and I couldn't wait to use it in any way that I wanted because I like the art of it. I like watching the construction being put together, which I eventually did because I started working with her. After I made a few outfits and people were asking me, oh, where'd you get that from? Because it was different.
What was the process? You would go to the dressmaker and you would say, I like this and I like that.
I would bring her the ideas that I wanted, and then I started learning about fabrics and I started going to the fabric stores and I would bring my own fabrics, and I brought my ideas and she would construct it for me. She would produce it. But it was a little difficult working with her, to be honest, because I didn't have my own control over my own production.
Which part of it was difficult? What did you feel like you weren't able to do that now you can do?
Well, I was a small fish in her ocean, so it was hard to get her attention. I would have to show up there at 7 a.m. for her to speak to me at 4 p.m. and me get what I wanted from her. So it was a lot of me sitting around and watching what the process was, how the pattern gets made, what the sewers are doing, speaking to the embroiderer, getting a feel. Somebody convinced me to put these things on Instagram because I kept getting people asking me, oh, where'd you get that from? I've never seen it before. And I was a little self-conscious to do it at first. I was hesitant because I was I like it, but who's gonna care type of thing. But then I started the Instagram, and I remember that night I literally got requests, and it just was moving very quickly for me, and I got clients right away. And I had to sit down and speak to the dressmaker at the time because, like I said, I was in control of my production, and I had to sort out the logistics of it, how it would work with her, and her having a loyalty to me because I'm bringing the client. In the end, it was difficult because I would design certain garments, and before my customer even wore it, she'd be selling it to some local stores. And my customers would get angry at me but at the same time, it was my design, it was my concept. And
when she was selling it to those local stores, you wouldn't get anything from that.
I would get nothing, and I had paid for pattern, which is one of the most expensive parts of making the garment. So it felt a little bit like I was being taken advantage of, which is why my dad stepped in after 3 years and he said, it's time for you to go out on your own and see what you can do.
So then you decide, I'm going to take a leap of faith,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm going to do it on my own.
Yeah.
What went into that logistically? Because now you have to build out a team.
We interviewed and we tested, sewing-wise, over a dozen people.
Do you remember what it was like in the beginning?
Well, I was so driven at that point. Like, I knew where I wanted to be.
What was driving you?
My love for the work. Like, it's always been about the love. I called it a hobby for most of the time I was working. Like, it never felt like a job. There were days where I was working 20 hours a day, and my dad has beds because he does bedding, so I would literally be taking power naps and pushing through.
Power naps in the office?
In the office.
On the beds?
On the beds. He was not thrilled about that. But
what kind of hours were you working?
there were days I got there at 4 in the morning, and like I said, my parents weren't thrilled about that, but they saw how happy it made me.
What was like the next big thing?
We asked to do the Maritel fashion show because I saw that as like my coming out party kind of thing, like my opportunity to show people what I can do on my own. So there were 42 individual outfits that needed to be customized to 21 girls. So every style had to be different, every body type was different, and we needed 42 ideas. But I had a blast doing it.
So you do this show, and did you feel like this took you to the next level?
That's when I officially changed my company name. I'd been styling Grace all that time. It was the right time to come out as Gracy Accad and a fresh start, and this is what I can do, and this is what I'm doing, and that we're a real company.
What was the next thing?
We selected from that a bunch of looks that we wanted to put as a collection, and we started contacting retailers, and we ended up going to PR.
You do this fashion week, it goes well.
Yeah.
Well received.
Well received.
So when you say fashion week, it's New York Fashion Week. It's twice a year, and those two weeks are vital.
Yes, to your year in sales.
Right, because that's when everyone sees
what came out, and
right.
That's when you get the publicity. One of the designers picked on me, actually. She was like, looking at me, she goes, "Where do you work?" And I'm like, "I work at Gracy Accad." And she goes, "Who's that?" I'm like, "Whatever, a new designer." And she goes, "What's your name?" I'm like, "Gracy Accad." And she was like judging me a little, and then this store comes up to me. It's like Panache, they're in the city, there and a few other stores, and they're like, "Gracy, we're so excited for your collection. We can't wait to have it in the store, blah, blah, blah." And then the woman to my right goes, "I'm from Martha Stewart, we love your stuff." And then she looks at me and she goes, "How long have you been doing this for?" I was like, "Oh, a couple years." She's like, she got like, whatever. But so some of the designers have some attitude.
Right.
And they're not excited about the new blood. We had a sales team, so they started showing our collection to stores, and we got into stores internationally, like throughout the country, and like top retailers like Mark Ingram took us in for a trunk show, and we very quickly got into the Asian market, like Japan and Korea. We did very well with.
Stores in Japan and Korea?
Mm-hmm.
How did you get to there?
From my sales reps.
Wow.
So they had the connections, and the Asian market is very big about quality, and our quality was impeccable, to be honest. Like, that's what we strived for.
What is the competition like?
Honestly, I feel like I have an advantage based on my pricing because we're very conservative, to be honest, about our markup. So we outprice other people.
It's still very high quality.
Very high quality, which is why we're very lucky that people recognize the quality and come in for the quality. And it's comparable to dresses that sell for 3 times the price. So,
like, why would somebody not buy from you?
Some people, to be 100% honest, do want a certain dress from a certain designer because this is their time, and it's like a lot right now. The designer of the moment in bridal, in my opinion, is like Monique Lhuillier, and she's very, very talented, but you see her dress and you instantly know that's a Monique, and you know the price tag attached to it, so it's like a little bit of a status thing.
Right.
But her dresses are beautiful,
right.
And she's like a role model of mine.
So it's more of the brand. They want people to know that that's what they're wearing.
Yeah. So we're trying to build up to that. I'm confident that we'll get where I want to be. And the biggest compliment I ever got after my first show was Martha Stewart said she could be the next Monique, and I took that as the biggest compliment I ever got.
How do you know what the next trend is going to be?
For me, it's not really about the trend so much, it's about doing something different and standing out in something different. So for like we did oh, this is one of the things we made, but we made a matching lace pantsuit because athleisure was in. So that got a lot of publicity. Like, my marker for having a successful fashion week is being printed in WWD as like one of the looks that were important. Like they narrowed down like jumpsuit and they put like 5 dresses. So it's always trying to create a standout piece that will be well received and get that publicity and be seen as you're still on trend.
Where do we stand today?
Market week is in a month, and we recently hired a more hungry sales team. I love their credentials. I respect them. I think it's the next step. If I want to get to where I want to get to, I have to take that risk.
Where do you want to get to?
Ideally, in my fantasy, and hopefully I can get there, I want to have a lifestyle brand where we license the name. Like, you have to build a name that's recognizable, and then you can move into a lower line where it's more affordable, and it's not particularly produced in New York like our garments, so it's better priced and an easier price bracket. And like, my dad gets excited. He's like, you should do perfume, you should do handbags, you should do shoes. And it's more about the licensing.
You got married on Sunday. Congratulations.
Yeah. Thank you.
And word on the street is that you wore 3 different dresses that you made yourself.
Yeah. We made 17 dresses total for the whole wedding.
I'm sure you were thinking about for a while how to make your dress like different and extra special.
Mm-hmm. There's a lot of pressure on that because everyone's first question is, what's the dress?
Right.
I felt the pressure, but once I knew I was getting engaged and all those, like the whole trajectory of everything, I instantly started thinking, what do I want to wear?
So you did 12 brides this summer.
I think a little bit over. I lost count because we were so busy.
Right. What gets you out of bed in the morning?
I'm psyched when I wake up in the morning. I'm psyched to see what they're in the midst of making. I'm the fit model generally, so I get to try it on and see what I want to change, how it should be a little bit different, how much bigger we want to go, how much more dramatic we want to go.
What do people not know about you?
I'm not sure if people don't know it, but I'm pretty shy.
What does it feel like to be so successful without having really studied fashion or had any type of like formal training?
At first, it was something that I wasn't super proud of, but as time went on, it's something that now it's like I am pretty proud about it, and I am confident. It just took time for me to feel comfortable about that in my own skin, that people will be like, but who is she? What does she know? And ideally, I would have interned for somebody, and that's something I recommend to everybody. Like, even if you're not studying fashion or you've got like going to college for it, like if you're interested in fashion, 100% intern.
Right.
There's just so much that you won't know unless you do so. Like, you don't technically need to go through difficult experiences and trial and error when you're learning just basics from someone else on someone else's dime, so you're not making those mistakes on your own. But I do recommend for people to get their foot in the door by a fashion house just to get certain experience.
Right.